Hello and welcome. In this video, in the HR challenge, we're looking at what is job benchmarking. Now, a benchmark, I'm going to just share my screen here with you and pop it up here. You see that little symbol there? A benchmark typically was a line cut in stone, cut into a stone, a groove cut into a piece of stone. And that stone obviously was fixed somewhere, a wall, and underneath there was an arrow. So what you're looking there is a line with an arrow chiseled in stone. And that was using for taking a level. So you could fit in, you could actually stick your bench into that groove and always be recording a level from a level. So the idea of a benchmark is that it's something that's repeatable. We have a level, we have something that is fixed against which we can measure. Now, in the world of commerce, obviously this is to do with land surveying and such like, and construction. In the world of commerce, we tend to talk about benchmarks as best practice. In the case that we're talking about here, we're talking about benchmarks in the concept of a job. What is the best in a job? What's required for a job? Can we say that this is the benchmark? This is what's required for a job, and then measure people against that particular standard. So, I just might read a couple of bits and pieces to you here. There is a clear connection between people's engagement and overall performance and organisational performance. This is clear. Organisations are made up of people. But recruiting talented candidates is not enough. We have to recruit people who are matched to the role, people who are assigned to specific roles that match their strengths. And that way they have the greatest impact on the organisation, the greatest opportunity to contribute. And as a consequence, they're more likely to remain on board and fully engaged. So this process is about identifying what it is that a job requires so we can match somebody to that job in a very effective way. So they are, by just being themselves, they are a superior performer in that role because they have all the attributes, the hard skills, the soft skills and everything in between that's required for success in that role. Why benchmark? There's no right or wrong when it comes to individuals' behaviours, motivators and so on and so forth. But there is a right or wrong when it comes to behaviours and motivators and skills and so on in a particular role. And in traditional hiring, that wasn't identified. We had a job description which typically said what the job does, but didn't talk about what the job required. So you knew this is what the job does, description of what the job sort of does. And then we took people's resumes, we interviewed them, and we hoped for the best. The benchmark is quite different. The idea of the benchmark is that you can clearly articulate what the job needs for success. Not what it does, what it needs for success. And as a consequence, what kind of person you want to hire first. Now most people skip over this. They say it's very simple. We'll hire somebody just like Joe. Joe is the best guy we have. We'll hire a few more Joes. Well, the fundamental problem here is that Joe may be a C player. He may be the best you have, but he may not be the best at all in the marketplace. Or he may not be the best at all for that particular role. He's doing a great job compared to everybody else, but maybe someone who was a really good match for that role would do a far superior job. So you have to sort of park that notion of looking at individuals who are incumbents in roles, if you wish, and say they're doing a great job and we just hire more people like them. That's not the answer. The answer is understanding what the job requires and articulating in a way that we can measure an individual as well so that we can compare them to the job. So job matching starts with what are the business outcomes or the organizational outcomes that are required, what are the deliverables of the role, i.e. the means, the deliverables of the role that will actually, the key accountabilities that will help that job achieve its ends. What are the dimensions of performance like behaviours, motivators, competence, acumen and other things that are required to be able to deliver on those key accountabilities, and then how can we manage candidates and compare them to that. It's a very simple process really, and just again here, when talents a person has are aligned with the jobs called for, they perform better and are happy at work. They don't feel stress, They're not worried. They know they're doing a good job. They know they're capable of doing a good job, and they just by being themselves, they can do a good job. So if it's done properly, it will have a significant impact on organisational performance, on engagement, on attracting staff into the organisation, and so on. So it's a really, really important process. I've written down here the benefits of benchmarking. Hire a match for the job, really. Provide an onboarding program. Personalised development plan for the individual. Personalised managing, coaching and mentoring for the individual. Identifying measurable performance indicators. Basis for job-related performance systems. A basis for succession planning. Basis for team building and development. So you can see here that the benchmarking is the foundation of this whole process of having an effective organisation, i.e. effective people. Because remember, the organisation is made up of people, and the performance of the organisation is made up of the performance of the individuals, and the performance of the individuals depends on how well matched they are to their roles. It's really as simple as that. So with a completed benchmark, you can screen candidates based on certain attributes. You can compare a person's attributes to the requirements of the job, and you can compare top and bottom performers to the job, to put development plans in place to improve people's performance, and so on. Now, in our suite of tools, the ones that we use are behaviours, driving forces, competence and acumen capacity. They're the 4 tools we use. So how do we do what we do? Why do we do what we do? What engaged and disengaged us? What skills have we developed? And our ability to think clearly, see clearly, and make good decisions and good judgments. Having EQ included down there, in the United States, EQ is not allowed to be used for recruitment because of adverse impact. It's ageist, i.e. the older you get, the higher your EQ, so it's ageist against younger people. But a lot of people in Europe use EQ, but you can't measure it for the job. It's not something you can measure. You can't measure the job's EQ. But a lot of people like to measure EQ and get insight into it. I tend to find that in the acumen capacity for senior roles particularly, I can see enough of what's going on in acumen capacity to have a good sense of the EQ of the individual. The dimensions of superior performance. Again, this whole model that we're talking about, this whole 4-part talent strategy, this to meet the HR challenge is all about this: discovering the right talent, engaging the right talent, advancing that talent, and helping that talent perform. So discover the right talent to match the needs in the organisation using this process. Then engage those people. If you have the right people in the right roles, they'll be engaged naturally. Then you can advance them, identify talent, look at succession planning, and manage their performance. So it's a really sort of fundamental part, I think, of the talent continuum. Without it, really and truly, you can't really start somewhere else. You can, and you can have interventions and do what you can, but it doesn't really improve performance. You really have to start back at the beginning and say, as of today, we're going to benchmark the first role, and everybody we hire for that role is going to be against that benchmark, and then we benchmark the next role, the next role, the next role, and then we do our succession planning, we do our development planning, we benchmark incumbents in roles against the existing role, but development plans in place, and slowly but surely we build the whole level of competence and engagement in the organisation. In the Good to Great book, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, great book, Jim Collins's book, and he talks about injecting a constant stream of talent into the organisation. But the talent has to be fit for purpose, i.e. for the role you're hiring. And they say the average cost of bad hire is 3 to 15 times somebody's salary. So, and actually I find that in many organisations, particularly smaller organisations, it's not even the money. It's the fact that that person represents 10% of the team, of that particular team, or 20% of that particular team, or maybe 50% there's only 2 people on that particular team. So it's a disruption to the business. Then go out trying to find a new person and onboard them, and all the time and effort that takes. That's the really big cost, as opposed to the monetary cost. In industry numbers, again, you can see them there in the guide, you can read through them yourself. The reason new hires don't work, this is really important. This piece of research done by career builders worldwide, they surveyed 6,000 HR professionals, and the following were the reasons they said that people didn't work out. They needed to fill the position quickly. 38% said we filled it quickly, i.e. we didn't go through due process, we didn't benchmark the role, we didn't match up the talent, we just filled the position, and of course the people left. It just didn't work out, whatever that means. That means, I think, we didn't know what we were hiring. We got something that wasn't what we thought it was going to be, or they got a job they didn't think they were going to get, or they didn't think it was that job, and they left. The company didn't test or research well enough, 21%, and the company didn't perform adequate reference checks, 70%. So we're saying here that 93% of it, really and truly, was about not benchmarking, not assessing the candidates to the job properly, not taking your time. Remember the old adage, hire in haste, repent at leisure. So I think this is really, really important. And the last comment I really sort of want to make around this is bias. We all hire, well, let me just say this. You all know that we buy from people that we like. It's interesting. We buy from people that we like. And we like people who are like ourselves. The same is true of hiring. We like people who are like ourselves. They went to the same school, they're the same colour, the same height, the same gender, the same education. They have the same belief system. They wear the same clothes. Who knows? We're full of prejudice and bias. And we don't realise it. These are unconscious bias. This is the problem. We don't realise our own prejudice. It's back here somewhere, but it's alive and well. So what you do with this process removes bias. We're not saying, what do I think? Or do I think he's a great candidate? I think she's a great candidate. No. What does the job require, and does this person match what the job requires? So benchmarking is really about trying to remove all this bias from the organisation. There are a few myths of hiring I want to look at quickly. The hiring process starts the job as usual. Well, it doesn't. Yeah, the hiring process starts with that benchmark. We understand not a list of what the job is going to do, a list of the deliverables that are required for that job, the key accountability of the job, and then what is required in terms of attributes, skills, competence, and so on for success in that role. I am biased when I hire, but it's wrong. I've just already said it. We're full of bias, we're full of prejudice. We've no idea of the prejudice and the bias that we bring to the whole selection process. My hiring process isn't perfect, but it's good enough. Probably wrong. Probably wrong. Most of us, in truth, if you go back up that list earlier, hire in haste, 38% we just had to fill the job and so on. That's the reality for the vast majority of us hiring. We just need somebody now. If they're warm, they've got a pulse, we hire them. All the CVs we received were definitely ended up with the best candidate. And I write down here, many of us tend to think that experience and education reign over everything. What skill sets did that person learn in the last row of 10 years? There's no way to know for sure without an assessment. Just look at their CV and their education, their resume. That's not the answer. You need more data points than that. Hiring is a time-consuming money pit. Wrong. Now, as you look at this process that I'm introducing to you, it may seem complicated. You might say, oh my God, this is a big money pit. This will go on forever. That's not true. It looks like that. I acknowledge that it does look like that when you look at this process first time. But that's actually not the case. Once you've done one, it is simple from then on. Absolutely simple. And once you've done one, you'll never go back to not doing it again. And it just becomes, think about it this way. Imagine you do it very quickly. You see Joe, you hire Joe. And 3 months later, you're firing Joe. Or 6 months later, he's messed up the team, damaged the business, whatever. Think about the time, effort and money that's been squandered there, as opposed to investing the day in profiling the job and selecting the candidates, going through that process. Which is the more expensive, which is the more time consuming, which is the bigger money pit? I think you'd have to acknowledge that is over here, is this hiring without due process. Although I acknowledge entirely that when we're under pressure, and HR seems to be permanently under pressure, when we're under pressure, it's really difficult to carve out that time for the things that are really important but not urgent. But we have to do that, and we have to start sometime. And you can say, well, I have my existing team, I am where I am, and we all know the old game cliche, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is today. We have to apply the same principle to this. Okay, we are where we are with our team, with our organisation, but let's start now. Let's start properly and say, from now on, one role at a time. We'll benchmark the first role and then the second role, then the third role, and we'll bring this process in one role at a time. Hiring tools are just used for hiring. I can't do much with them. That's not true. It's the foundation. A talent management system is one, so like the one I'm proposing to you now, the foundation is based on this process. The onboard, the coaching, the development, the team building, succession planning, leadership development, and so on. It's all based on this. So it's really, really important. This is the foundation stone. If I could wave a magic wand for you and do one thing, this would be it. I bring this into your organization. Everything flows from this. Engage your workforce from day one. Just remember this: if you go through this process, successful onboarding, you go through this process, all of this, increased job satisfaction, all the things that we've talked about before, they all follow this process. You hire the person to match the role, they feel engaged, they become productive. Advance them, develop your talent. You know, time and money are wasted when training isn't personalised to each individual's verified needs. So think about this. Think about all the money, all the L&D time and energy that's wasted on training programs that aren't needed or aren't suitable or aren't appropriate. What we need to do is identify, this is the role, this is the individual, there's the gaps, that's the training requirement. And then when we consolidate those for a group of individuals, we end up with a training matrix for the organisation. Some individuals will be doing things individually on their own, some will be doing them in groups, some of them will be organisation-wide because everybody needs them. But this is how you build your L&D strategy. You build it from each individual one by one. I won't go through all this team building and communication. I've already mentioned development planning and coaching. But performance, bench strength starts with a benchmark. And I really think, I've written there, one measure of an organisation's health is the state of its talent pipeline. And if you stop and think about this, the quality of the people you have in that talent pipeline, how reassuring it is when you have quality, and how despairing it is when there is no quality there, when you don't have a talent pipeline. So it doesn't really matter whether it's executive succession planning, open management positions or whatever, or staffing just new roles. How ready is your company to fill these roles? What kind of pipeline do you have of talent? And the key here really and truly is to have built this bench strength through this process, or at the very least have this process done. So it's very easy, if the process done, very, very easy to identify talent internally or externally because you've already completed the process for each role. The last thing I want to just make down here, point away down here, is this thing of commitment and accountability. What's really interesting about the benchmarking process is I want you to imagine you have a group of subject matter experts together. These are the key people, the incumbents in the role, peers working with it, supervisors of that role. And they all come to a point of agreement on the key deliverables and the attributes for that role. So for the first time ever, you have absolute agreement and accountability amongst that group of people about why this role exists and what's required for superior performance. 1. 2, when you actually engage somebody in this process, you have a clear statement of the key deliverables of the role and the development plan that's required. So now we've got a performance metric that we can hold people accountable to. Are you delivering on these key deliverables? Because we can put metrics against them. And are you delivering on your development plan? Are you implementing it for superior performance? And it leads directly into the performance management system. So that is the sort of the case for job benchmarking. And what is job benchmarking? What I want to do now in the next video is we're going to go and look at how do you actually do this process? How do you actually create a job benchmark?